Okay, chapter 19 of 50 chapters. I just redid 2 weeks ago, or a week and a half, of a book God dictated to me. Not unlike dictating the Torah to Moses. Not unlike dictating the books of the prophet to each individual prophet. If somebody is saying God is speaking to them, and it's put into a Bible anyway, they are men and divine beings. The Holy Spirit has alighted upon them, and God is in His Spirit. He's in you. It's not just Isaiah 11. It's just not the Spirit of God that alights upon you. It's the presence of God Himself. You become a man and divine being. Then you can hear His words, and we find that in the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel said, the Lord was speaking to me. At that moment, a spirit entered me. Then I could hear the words of God, which were, get up on your feet. Which God slammed me to the ground so many times. When I read that, I'm thinking, poor Ezekiel, God is slamming to the ground. That's the fire of refinement. Chapter 19. All this is God's. If you see me looking down here, I'm reading God's words that He told me to type. Oftentimes, I'm just talking about a lot of different things. The Essenes of the Dead Sea Scrolls embody Jesus. The story of Jesus most likely began around 100 years before the story begins with His birth. At the beginning of the Common Era, the first written version of the story, and there's many versions, is the Gospel of Mark that dates from 66 to 70 Common Era, about 40 years after the story says Jesus died. This also is the time of the Jewish revolt against Rome. There were 4 revolts. And the defeat and expulsion of the Jewish people from the Promised Land. The knowledge of the Hebrew Bible in a time of illiteracy indicates that the Gospel of Mark was written by rabbis or very learned men in Judaism, which could be anybody of the Essenes. Men who decided they needed to write down this story that had been circulating by word of mouth and storytelling for about 140 years, with many different versions of His life to be taken to the Gentiles to make money. Their temple, homes, and country were gone, and it was desperate times for the Jewish people. According to the oral story that most likely began 100 years before the Common Era with a man called the Teacher of Righteousness, who established a sect of Judaism known as the Essenes. They're the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, prolific writers and copyists and commentators on the Hebrew Bible, the scrolls of the Hebrew Bible. They weren't a Bible at that time. This Teacher of Righteousness, that's his very name. Clearly, he believed, and his followers believed, he was the man of Isaiah 53. He's not the first one, but I shall be the last. The Teacher of Righteousness who fought with the wicked priests, just as Jesus did not like the way of the temple. The temple was being run. Neither did Jesus. Did not like all the sinning going on in Jerusalem. And did not live there. And He didn't. He and His 12 most often camped out on mountains near Jerusalem. And the only time I know he went in there was to upset the marketplace, throwing tables around, this and that. Didn't like the way the temple was being run. And to ride the ass into Jerusalem to be put to death, which is the greatest lie and deceit ever written. Again, my words come from God himself. Those storytellers who were diverse and from different backgrounds, ethnicity, and ability captured the imagination of the crowds with their oral skills and would earn their livelihood from donations of money and good. Few could read in a world where literacy was restricted to just a few. And this did not begin to change until the latter Middle Ages. While the earliest forms of written communication date back to about 3,500 to 3,000 before the Common Era, literacy remained for centuries a very restricted ability closely associated with the exercise of power. Schools in ancient Israel, if any existed, served only the sons of the rich and religious elite. Storytellers in general would be learned men, captivate the imagination of the crowds at the gates to Jerusalem and the meeting places of Jerusalem with tales that people of a harsh and brutal time wanted to believe. A time when medical treatment was primitive and life expectancy was 30 to 35 years. This is averaging those who died at birth to those who died with long life into their 70s and beyond. A time when people believed in mythical gods and gods who were men and making sacrifices to gods for favor and for safety, healing, long life, crops, and fertility, numbers. You needed big numbers so you could take other people's stuff. The Dead Sea Scrolls are generally thought to have been produced by the Essenes, and the Essenes are a group that protested the way the temple was being run, just like Jesus. Many of the Essenes went to the cliffs and caves east of Jerusalem by the Dead Sea, known as Qumran, to prepare the way of the Lord, following the commands of the prophet Isaiah. They went to Qumran to get away from the sinning of the people of Jerusalem and the ways of the religious elite at the temple. One of the first leaders of the Qumran community was the teacher of righteousness, identified in a Damascus document in the Habakkuk Pesher, which is a type of commentary in Hebrew like a midrash. In the Pesher literature, he is presented as a founding figure who directly clashed with an opponent called the wicked priest. You know, Jesus did that. It's one of his prophecies that failed. You high priest, you shall see me return, is what Jesus said. When the high priest is dead, Jesus hadn't returned. It's another false prophecy. False prophecy, false God. A myth. Never existed. It's just a story. You're reading it right now. You're hearing it. The man described in Isaiah 53 is often referred to as the teacher of righteousness because of verse 11. When God's of 53, when God says, my righteous servant makes the many righteous, the teacher of righteousness and his followers of the Essenes left a library of information on his teachings himself and Scripture, which would seem to be the first of many men, or claimed to be by others, the man of Isaiah 53. The Hebrew noun pesher is found in the Hebrew of the Qumran scrolls in the sense of, and God had me put this in quotes, meaning, explanation, interpretation, close quote. It is similar to the Midrash in the Talmud. Various biblical texts were deemed prophetic and were subjected to pesher interpretation, even when appearing in non-prophetic literary context. A copy of the pesher of Isaiah dates to the beginning of the 1st century Common Era. The pesher of Habakkuk attributes these techniques to the founder of the community, the teacher of righteousness. That's his name. We don't know his real name. The Qumran sect, like the broader Jewish movement from which it sprang, took a critical view of the established orthodoxy of its time, as did Jesus, believing Israel to be under divine judgment. Messianic error, it continues today, a falsehood. Regarding itself as the true remnant of Israel and awaiting its imminent vindication at the end of days, which has been changed by Malachi 3, by God. At the end of days, evil will cease. This is no longer the case. There's 7 prophets who said things like this. 6. 7th prophet, the last one God speaks to, changes it dramatically. Would live under divine blessing. Okay, end of days. At the end of days, evil would cease. The wicked would be destroyed, and the righteous would live under a divine blessing. This is 100 years before before the Common Era. This is not unlike the teachings in Judaism today of a redemption, restoration, and exaltation with peace throughout the world when the Anointed One, that is me, Moshiach, comes. It did not happen for them. It is this teaching that Jews for Judaism uses in their analysis that Isaiah 53 describes the Jewish people as God's righteous servant. Redemption, restoration, and exaltation. That exaltation is supposed to be from the world. Never gonna happen. What a pipe dream. How much money are you trying to get from your followers, Jews for Judaism? You're going to make them feel real good that the world's going to finally love them. They don't have to live under persecution with your lies that are not in the Hebrew Bible. You think God doesn't get angry, do you? You think you got an easy way out. You pray every day. You do everything a rabbi's supposed to do, orthodox. And you think that's, you go to Yom Kippur and you're forgiven of anything you may have, mistakenly done, right? Oh, you humble person full of humility. It's everybody in your organization, God says. And he just said it. He said it to me. We'll see what you do. If you or Tovia Singer put a YouTube post on saying how wrong you've been and lift me up, which is what your God needs in this day of the Lord, take the time to learn what that is. And apparently neither one of you have. Go ahead and keep ignoring it. See how your life turns out. No, he won't do anything directly, but it's a little thought for you to think about in the times things do go bad. And quite frankly, they should be going bad for you right now. You don't know how to prophesy Moshiach. You say, Moshiach come, Moshiach come. Why? When I'm here, and I am, you're reckoned with and dismissed before God himself. If you knew how to read the Bible, which is what you say about the Jews who believe in Yeshua. Oh, they don't know how to read the Bible. I guarantee you don't. Read the book. Read the book and what God says. You'll find out, oh, I was missing something. I'm still in the fire refinement because God says I still get too angry. And I tell him I need to be angry with these fools. It's the way I live my life. That's why I got selected. A fighter. Moses, a murderer. Ezekiel, furious and bitter in the hand of God. That's who he picks. The persecution of the Essenes and their leader, the teacher of righteousness, probably elicited the sect's apocalyptic visions. These included the overthrow of the wicked priests of Jerusalem and of the evil people, and in the dawn of the Messianic age, to recognize their community as the true Israel, still teach today. This is antiquity, people. They lived over 2,000 years ago. Josephus Flavius described this sect, the Essenes, as one of the main three philosophical sects among the Jews, with a very detailed description. Excerpts from his book, Wars 2, Chapter 8, include the third sect, which pretends to a severe discipline. These men are despisers of riches, as was Jesus, and so very communicative as raises our admiration. As for the piety towards God, is very extraordinary. This is from the Jewish Virtual Library, Essenes and Joseph Flavius. Again, God would have me go here. He'd tell me, go there, read that, copy it, put it on your notepad. We'll put it in WordPress later as a blog. Then it became a chapter. The other two philosophical sects were the Pharisees and the Sadducees. In the New Testament of Christianity, the Essenes are never mentioned. All the stories of Jesus and his clashes with the religious elite of Jerusalem in the New Testament are with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. According to Josephus, the name of the gate why do you think they were left out? The prolific writers and commentaries on Isaiah and the scrolls, and they believe their leader is described in Isaiah 53. Why do you think he got left out? Oh, I'm getting ready to read to you where Jesus said he's a human sacrifice. Well, it's not this chapter, it's coming up. According to Josephus, the name of the gate in the southern wall of Jerusalem on Mount Zion was called the Essenes Gate. It's where they tell stories. Everything about the Essenes says that Jesus would have been an Essene. He also clashed with the high priest of Jerusalem, very unhappy with the way the temple was being run, and despised riches and worldliness. Jesus, Paul, and Peter all said Jesus was the fulfillment of Isaiah 53 and the teacher of righteousness, all of Christianity does today. That's because of the lie and deceit of Jesus himself. Or whoever wrote that gospel, Jesus is nothing more than a myth. He never existed. The Essenes were writers, copyists, this is God's words, and had their own gate in the southern wall of Jerusalem. Their founding leader claimed to be God's righteous servant, and so did Jesus. It is impossible to believe that the Essenes had not heard of Jesus. It is impossible to believe that they would not have gone to Jesus to question him and verify the stories around him and his claim of being God's righteous servant and write about him. A man that healed the sick, removed blindness, had the crippled walk, fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, walked on water, turned water to wine, raised the dead, and was crucified. After all that. And 3 days later, he came back to life. The Essenes were present in and around Jerusalem for 100 years before the birth of Jesus, and another 40 or so years after his death, after the age of 30, in the first written story of him and his life, in 66 to 70 Common Era, 40 years later after his death. There is not one word written by the Essenes of Jesus. There is no account in the New Testament of Jesus and an Essene. There are no writings or even a mention of him by a single person or group or him. Most prophets write themselves into the story. That was a part of his generation while he was alive. 5 false prophecies of returning. Every one of them had to be in his generation. They're all dead and he's not back. I don't know what the Christians think they're looking for. They just, I don't know, religious people just make things up. I don't know. I'm still, remember I was an atheist for 50 years. I can't believe the things I'm learning. Religious people simply make things up. Rabbis make things up. Christians just make things up. Well, I'm with God, and I learn from him. So it's kind of tough. And I have all this knowledge that no rabbi has. Certainly not Tovia Singer, Kravitz, or Michael Skoback with their garbage of man's word. And I don't know where Tovia's coming from. He's the worst of all of them. 6 million murdered Jews are all the people gathered as Israel, given long life, exposed to death, not murder, exposed to death and given long life. That doesn't sound like a righteous servant to me. Yeah, he's just kind of out there. I mean, did Hitler offer them these guilt offerings? That's what he says. He says they're all guilt offerings. Well, how does that make them the righteous servant? Are you a righteous servant? Tovia Singer? Well, apparently you say all Jews are. Because 6 million is not all the Jews of the earth at that time. They're not all gathered as one man. The ones who were gathered, I'm sure, weren't very pleased with it. I don't think they offered themselves for a gift. Your Hebrew to English certainly lacks something, doesn't it? Or is the whole thing a lie? You just wanted something that you thought would be a best weapon against the Christians and the missionaries. And you just made a bunch of things up. You cannot be that stupid. It's possible. And we'll see what happens. But that's just a pathetic commentary on Isaiah 53, especially before God, who is here in his day. I have to listen to a grousing dog, as he calls some rabbis and shepherds in the Hebrew Bible. A grousing dog who does not heed, revere. And don't tell me you do. I can hear you right now. I pray every day. I do everything you're supposed to do as an Orthodox Jew. Yeah, and you teach man's word that conflicts with God's words, and you take from the Torah and add to. There's nothing that makes him hotter than that. Especially you calling him a God of human sacrifice. Are you just sick in the head? Or you wanted Moshiach here? Well, he's here. And I'm not something a little man like you wants to tangle with all your stupidity. Yeah, Moses killed a man in anger. Ezekiel tells you, I went in fury and bitterness in my spirit in the hand of God. That's who he wants. Why? Because we got to fight people like you. Ignorance. Pompous, arrogant, and ignorant is how God describes you. Tobias Singer, Michael Skrovac, Kravitz. That's how he defines you. Sure, don't believe. Good luck finding Moshiach one day. There are no writings by Jesus. Nothing was written by his disciples. There are no writings by Herod or Pilate or any Roman newspaper, poem, or book of this man who healed the multitudes, fed the poor, walked on water, raised the dead, turned water to wine, was crucified, murdered, put to death, and rose from the dead to human life, and then rose to heaven. Well, there are three Gospels and the names of three disciples. They are all considered pseudepigraphic. In Greek, that means falsely attributed. Writings which were attributed to authors who did not actually write them. And they were all written long after his death, full of quotes and teachings from Jesus himself. Quoted parables and long speeches and long sermons, the Temple on the Mount, that could not be accurate if passed by word of God. There's only one answer. The Essenes themselves are the beginning of the stories, the time of storytelling. The Essenes were the embodiment of the man Jesus. They were persecuted, and many lived in the country away from the city, as did Jesus. They were persecuted for their beliefs and disliked the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the high priests, as did Jesus. Jesus is a myth. He never existed, and the story of Jesus and his life does not fulfill the verses of Isaiah 53. If you don't believe that statement, go see my chapters, God's chapters, in the book Isaiah 53 and the Day of the Lord, which this is coming from, chapter 22. It's all about Jesus not fitting the verses. This is from chapter 10, verse 19 through 20 of the book of Hebrews. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way. He forgives the Jews by his written word, in case you haven't noticed. It's the second time it's happened, which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh. No, come on in. Oh, thank you. I'm almost there.
Okay.
That was my sister starting lunch, which I can't wait for. God's got me on one. I get to eat once a day, 24 hours at lunch. I eat as much as I can, I promise you. It's just a new way to maltreat me.